today's video, we're back to Ramesses tests, and this time in chronological order, going up against the second generation infantry commander that changed the game quite drastically, Alexander the Great and Richard the First. That's one of the strongest marches in the game to date when it comes to infantry, and in this video, we're gonna put Ramesses up against them with multiple commanders. We expanded the pool of commanders we put with Ramesses to the test, so in this video, you're gonna get to see El Cid as well as, curiously enough, Edward the First, the secondary. Is he good there? Good question. We're about to find out in this video. Sit back, drop a like on it, and let's go. Hey there YouTube, welcome back to Gekko Gaming. We're at part 3 of this long series testing Ramesses II. The decision was I want to try to do things a little bit in a chronological order, try to go through as many commanders as I can, many pairings as I can, and play Ramesses at what I think is his position to be at, which is a primary commander. As you guys mentioned in feedback, you guys want to see more of him as secondary among other commanders being tested. All that's in the making. For now, I'm a sponsored content creator by Rise of Kingdoms. If you enjoy the content, drop a like on this video. If you want more of these Ramesses tests, make sure you're smashing that like button and subscribing to the channel with that bell on. Tomorrow, one more of these, and this time with a very interesting pair. Spoiler alert, Alex remains. So in this set of tests, we went up against AOD. AOD had a Alexander and she brought up Richard along with it. The equipment that we were rocking on our Ramesses as well as on Edward at some point was this equipment right there. And the equipment that Alexander was rocking was that one right there. Now, yes, you guys have mentioned, let's try to do tests without equipment, try to match city skins or something like that. In future tests that are coming up, we have one more video that is already recorded, and the next few tests I'm going to try to optimize with your feedback. So I understand that some of you are a little skeptical about these tests. We might reduce some of them with the more interesting empty equipment stuff, whatever not. So for now, you want to keep taking things with a grain of salt, awesome, but at least we have something to start working with. It's a good basis, it's a good progress. So let's get on to the first fight. For test 1, we have Ramesses and Marisa up on deck against Alexander and Richard. We are expecting the infantry to go down to the archers. That's how it's meant to be. The idea here, once more, was to see the effect of Ramesses with all these different commanders as secondary, how well they fare against these different commanders. Alexander now outputting a substantial amount of damage compared to something like Charles Martel, who is more about the anti-swarm technology, more about counter damage than actual damage, and Alexander is more damageful in here. And with Richard healing or attempting to heal in the back, I was hoping to see a very close fight, but by the looks of it, it seems that Alexander and Richard just can't take the heat of a Ramesses. And so our report looks something like this. We have about 2-minute 24-second fight, and it's something like this. Again, crazy enough, we're looking at the heal level of Richard the First and the heal level of Ramesses. Ramesses is definitely halving the damn heals on Richard, and we got fairly lucky on those 2 minutes by the looks of it. Those 2 minutes, we healed 7.2 thousand troops, which is actually nuts. The severely wounded are looking fairly interesting. 9,000 to the 16,000. It's not as severe as what we saw with Charles Martel and Richard 2 videos ago. If you haven't seen that, card up on the top right for that. But in general, 37,000 troops remaining. That is 37% of the march is essentially here. These commanders, as mentioned, are all expertise. You guys saw the equipment previously, and indeed, with our equipment on here, archer attack up to 170, 78%, 115. The equipment is not perfect, but this is what we're working with right now. We're gonna see that as we did previously, the base test, the one that we used to see the difference between Edward and Ramesses and all these things. And you'll see really the differences. We'll go back and revisit the results once we get there. But let's go on to the second match. The second one here was Ramesses and Yi Song-Ye. Now, Ramesses and Yi Song-Ye have proven that in a 1v1, they're not the greatest of pairs. They're not really... they're not meant to be in a 1v1 scenario. It is why we're seeing a little bit of a different result in here. Our Ramesses taking a little bit of an earlier beating. A few of you asked in the videos previously, why are the barbarians not getting hit by AoE? So a few updates ago, what ended up happening is that AoE works for PvP and for neutral troops, but it doesn't mix between the two. So once you're AoEing for PvP, the neutral troops don't get hit by it. And once you are AoEing for neutral troops, you won't hit someone who's not in your alliance or something like that in the nearby vicinity. So this fight was a good little fight. It was not that much quicker, actually, to be honest. It was quite similar. It was about 2 minutes and 18 seconds. Looking at a Ramesses Yi Song-Ye, and indeed, look at the difference. First of all, the heals here went up quite drastically. It looks like Ramesses didn't proc as much, or it seems that things are a bit up here. Like if you take a peek, 15,000 heals compared to this versus the 20,000 heals, something looks terribly wrong. If we look at a quick peek at the time in here, we're talking about 2 minutes and what? We just said this, 18 seconds versus what looks like 2 minutes and 24 seconds. So Richard did manage to heal more, which is interesting. It's weird and interesting and kind of cool. Also, the severely wounded went up quite a bit for our friend Ramesses Yi Song-Ye, 24% of the March surviving compared to 37. It's also due to a lot of other things, including this healing. It allowed more damage to be done. The numbers are not that significant when it comes to the differences in here, but the numbers of surviving troops is a crucial point. The numbers of surviving troops really tell the story. A 24% compared to 37%, 13% more survival rate with a Tamaris. By the looks of it, Ramesses really enjoys that extra skill damage debuff that Tamaris gives, and Yi Song-Ye on a 1v1 at least is just not delivering enough for this March to hold that long term. Now, let's go to fight number 3. So fight number 3 is finally Ramesses and El Cid. I told you guys we'll be testing El Cid. We finally got it done. In this video, in the next video, we're testing El Cid as well. Curiously enough, AOD's March, there's no AoE here, so thankfully for her, or else that March would have taken a little bit of a beating, that Gatherer coming home. Ramesses and El Cid was a very interesting set of troops. It exceeded my expectations in the sense that Edward and Tamaris really work well with each other. And to take Tamaris away from Edward to send it with Ramesses seemed to have been, up to now, the best idea. It seemed to have worked the better. However, if you take a quick peek at this March with an El Cid, it's looking very good. And the report out of this fight is actually very unique. Out of all the tests, I was much more surprised about this than anything else. This was probably the biggest fight, the longest fight of them all. 2 minutes, 49 seconds. That means Richard got a boatloads of heals out there, right? Well, he actually healed much less than in the previous fight with a Yi Song-Ye in the back. Ramesses did get a little bit of extra of those heals out there, much more than in here. You can really see that 10% chance to heal working in the favor of Ramesses. And this is something we cannot test, right? This is something we cannot attest for. You can flip a coin 100 times and get 50 times head, and you can flip a coin another time 100 times and only get 20 times head. And that's a 50-50. So 10% chances are very hard to gauge. And you can see it's kind of similar to what happened with Tamaris, the numbers in here, 9.3, 16k. Richard actually healed much more against El Cid. That was because the match was longer. But the severely wounded are at 16.7 compared to 16.064 and 9.3 compared to 9.6. 35% of the March surviving against the 37 with Tamaris. This El Cid is indeed expertised. You can see that our archer attack went down drastically because there was no Tamaris in there. But listen, this held off really well. El Cid found himself a spot as far as I'm concerned. because keeping Edward Tamaris seems like a good idea as of right now. And Elsid is really bringing it to the table. He's enhancing this Ramses quite drastically. And I feel like for events, for things like, for example, Lost Canyon or something like that, when you're looking for pairs all over the place, Edward Tamaris really do good damage. While Ramses now needs a friend, Elsid seems to be really, really a good friend for him. And I'm impressed. I'm really impressed with what I see with Elsid so far. Let's go take a look at the next fight, which was a very odd one. Yes, Edward is meant to be a primary commander. You read his first skill, you see it gets slashed by half by being secondary. But I had to try. I said, you know what? I want to put Ramses primary with everything I can behind them, archers, and see the different effects of these commanders. Do I recommend doing this? I already can tell you, no. That Edward can do stupendous amount of damage as a primary commander. There's absolutely no point in putting him behind anyone. You're slashing his first skill by half, even though you're doing a good amount of damage with him in respective to having someone that does a good amount of damage with Ramses. I still think this is a misuse of that commander. Nonetheless, I've told you guys we thought further about more and more pairs that we want to test and just give the whole spectrum of results. And this was one of them. It was a weird one. It was a unique one. It was one that I probably will continue testing just to show you guys the differences. But I truthfully do not recommend even going this route at all. If anything, Ramses might go secondary, and we'll test that too. Here is the report. Did I mention that last match was the last fight was the longest one? 3 minutes, 10 seconds, 13 seconds. 3 minutes, 13 seconds. Look at this. First of all, the length of the fight equals more heals for Richard, which means more pain for us. We healed a decent amount. Looks like we procced a decent amount of heals. 5.4 compared to the 2 we saw in the previous test, and 7.2s were a little bit better. I wouldn't go with this route at all. Again, Edward is expertised, and it's an Edward and Ramses with all the equipment and all that good stuff. 10,000 against 17,000. It's the most severely wounded we've done. Thank you, Edward. Makes sense. But the heals are really not worth it. You're really elongating the fights, which means you're allowing Richard to do what Richard does best, which allows also Alexander to continually use skills. It's just a bad idea altogether, even though, technically speaking, 22% of the March survived here, compared to a 24% with Yi Song-Ye. So even though only 2.5% healed, I promise to you, I believe that if more of this would have healed, this number would have been a little bit better. So quite frankly, we 100% can see that this was not a good idea. I still tested it. I still wanted you to see this report. I hope you guys can appreciate it for what it is, rather than go in the comments and, oh, well, Edward never should be secondary. Of course, Edward shouldn't be secondary. We're giving you guys all the pairs available, all the permutations for us to see the results. And I hope you guys can appreciate that. Now let's go to the final test, which is the control test, and then we'll wrap up this video with a little bit of insight. Yes, we did not forget to replace the gear. This time, Edward has the equipment. All is good in the hood right now. What's going on here is an Edward Tamaris control test. Essentially, the same exact equipment that Ramses had. This time, Edward Tamaris. We wanted to see the results, compare, see if Ramses is a viable option as a primary against an Alexander. Talk a little bit more about these things, and for that we need to always have a comparison to what was previously the best pair out there for archers, whether or not it puts up the same amount of numbers, whether it put out the same amount of damage, same amount of defense, same amount of everything. We're looking really to expand our horizon and understanding on the differences between these marches and the little bit of differences in the results in all of them. This is why we do the control test on every single test set. With that being said, easy peasy for Edward. We expected that. Infantry against archers. And the report, well, interesting. So in terms of heals, we can see that the fight was about 2 minutes and 29 seconds. It was one of the shorter fights. It wasn't one of the crazy long ones that we had with the Ramses and even El Cid. Like Ramses El Cid was much longer than this. And so here's the thing. There are no heals on our side this time. 9.6 K severely wounded compared to the 15, it kind of puts up the same numbers, right? There's a little bit of extra umph in here, but if we go very quickly and take a look at this, like this trade-off is worse than that one. This trade-off is kind of the same thing, a little bit better with Ramesses over an Edward. So you can see 9.3, 16K with the heals though, 37% remaining, compared to this one right here, which is 9.6, 15K, no heals, 27% of the match of the March remaining, but 21,000 heals on this side as well. Quite frankly, 21,000 heals on a 2-minute fight compared to what we saw here, which was on this test, 15,000, shows me that this time around, Ramesses was not as helpful when it comes to slashing heals down. He did slash a good amount, right? We're looking at about 30% cutoff in terms of the heals, and thankfully we also healed a good amount. I am still behind the fact that Ramesses is a viable commander to use. I still think that he's been doing fairly good in our tests. We're looking at, we saw bigger changes and bigger differences with other sets of commanders compared to Alexander the Great and Richard the First. And quite frankly, I'm really looking forward to see how else he turns out. This is not a viable thing. I don't think this is a good idea. On the next video, we're going to go up against a very odd march, but one that works really well and one that's really recommended to anyone who's going with infantry, as Alexander the Great is an unbelievably good commander, but he's not, Richard is not the commander that content creators across the globe really, and well, technically across the globe, we recommend your first expertise legendary commander is Yi Song-Ye. Now, if you want to go infantry, Alexander is a fantastic guy, and so our next set of tests is Alexander and Yi Song-Ye. That is right. Alexander and Yi Song-Ye is a super viable march. You guys are getting a little bit of a spoiler of the next video. It's a super viable march. You're going to see an interesting set of results. We're going to wrap up this first set of tests. And now, after tomorrow's video, we're going to take a step back really quickly from this. I'm going to go into ARC practice modes with a few folks. We're going to do a bunch of different tests, including all the optimizations you guys have been suggesting. It's the time right now to keep commenting down below more optimizations, more pairs, more things that you guys want to see. But understand that up until tomorrow's video, all this was recorded within the same time frame. So to keep saying the same thing over and over and thinking like, you know, why didn't he do it? It's already recorded, right? So hopefully from not tomorrow's video, but the tests we'll do after that, the video tests we'll do after that, they'll include all of your feedback and marches that you guys requested and all that good stuff. For now, I'm Gekko. I'm out of here. Thank you guys very much for watching this video. Don't forget to drop a like on it, subscribe to the channel. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, anything, count down below in the comments or in our Discord. Link in the description down below. Thank you for hitting 3,000 members in our Discord. That's insane. I want to see us get to 4, 5, 6, and even 10. So let's get those down below. And I'll see you guys sooner rather than later. Take care. Peace.